And so now we want to take that thinking deeper with one of the country's leading experts on the issue of choice, and he's going to come to us from the International Space Station, I think, something like that. So we should see Barry's face here very soon. There he is, great. Let me do a quick intro, Barry, and then I'll turn it over to you. Barry is the Dorwin Cartwright Professor of Social Theory and Social Action in the Psychology Department at Swarthmore College, where he has taught since 1971. He's the author of 11 books, among them The Battle for Human Nature, The Costs of Living, The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, and in 2010, Practical Wisdom, The Right Way to Do the Right Thing. He is a fellow of both the American Psychological Association and the American Psychological Society. His research and teaching focus on the intersection of psychology and economics, and more specifically on how the abundance of choice in modern life both liberates and bedevils those who face it. Take it away, Barry.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Can I get some indication that you can hear me?
We hear you.
You hear? Okay, good. Let me have the first slide. I'm really sorry, first of all, that I can't be with you. Unfortunately, I have to teach this afternoon, and I don't want any of my students dropping out because I failed to show up. I teach at Swarthmore College, where failure to complete is a rare problem. 98% of our students end up getting degrees. Nonetheless, the things that I have to talk to you about today, I find bedeviling even our students. And I suspect that they are even more consequential when it comes to the populations that you folks are primarily concerned with. I'm going to talk about research that other people have done and that I have done, and almost none of it is directly connected to college choice and college completion. But I think, nonetheless, that there are important lessons to be learned when it comes to designing programs that are going to encourage students to stick with it. So let's begin. Next slide. There is in the United States especially, but in most of the Western industrialized world, what I have come to call an official syllogism. And the syllogism goes roughly like this. If there's one thing you can't have too much of, it's freedom. The more freedom people have, the better off they are. The more freedom people have, the happier they are. The more freedom people have, the greater their well-being. We just accept that it's basically in the water supply in this culture. So if you accept it, then the question is, what do you do to enhance freedom? What does it mean for people to have more freedom? And it becomes apparent, I think, quickly, that freedom in the absence of choice is empty, it's hollow, it's freedom in name only. So the way to enhance freedom is to give people more choice. The more freedom people have, the happier they are. The more choice people have, the more freedom they have. And so it must be true, if those two things are true, that the more choice people have, the happier they are. More choice brings more well-being, because more choice brings more freedom. So this is the, as I say, the syllogism that has governed policymaking in the United States for many, many years. And we certainly have embodied it in many of our day-to-day institutions and activities. So next slide. I took a walk through my local supermarket, which is, by the way, not a gigantic supermarket. And instead of buying anything, I just counted. And this is a sample of what I counted. And this is almost 10 years ago, so my guess is you could increase each of these categories by 40 or 50%. You must admit that we have a lot of choice when it comes to doing our grocery shopping. Now, we have always had choice when it comes to doing our grocery shopping. Now we just have more of it. And arguably, this is a, quote, mere quantitative change, although I have a feeling that when the quantitative changes get bigger enough, they start to feel qualitative. But in addition to enormously increased choice in parts of our lives where we've always had choice, there are other parts of our lives where we used to have no choice, where we now have substantial choice. Next slide. I don't know how many people in the audience are as old as I am, but I'm old enough to remember when there was exactly one telephone company, and there was basically one telephone. and you had no choice at all except whether or not to use it. Those days are completely gone. We now have different instruments, different calling plans, different companies, and most strikingly different intelligent telephones. Next slide. These are the cell phones of the future. The one in the middle is my favorite. And what's striking about this cartoon, which I hope you can read the captions on, is that this was a parody when the cartoon appeared 10 years ago, when smartphones weren't all that smart. And now it hardly begins to capture what we can do with our cell phones. So what that means is that here's a domain that I think is kind of trivial, but a lot of people think is pretty important, where we used to have no choice, where we now have substantial choice. Next slide. It leads people to go into their telephone store and ask this question: do you have a phone that doesn't do too much? And the answer to that, by the way, is no. There's only one kind of phone that you can't get anymore, and that's a phone that is just a phone. Next slide. To raise the stakes a fair amount, in the world of healthcare, doctors are no longer tell patients what to do. The official ethic of the American medical profession is the ethic of patient autonomy, which means that patients get to decide, not doctors. Doctors let you know what the options are, they tell you what the potential risks and benefits of the various treatments are, but the decision is yours. This is a decision that roughly 2/3 of patients who have serious illnesses do not want to make. This is a choice that people by and large don't want. Nonetheless, it's a choice that has been thrust upon them. And here, unlike what cell phone you get, the consequences can be quite substantial. Next slide. As I'm sure you all know, the company pension plan is a thing of the past. Instead, our employers shift all the risk from them onto us, and they give us a variety of investment instruments to put into our 401ks or the equivalent. What that means is that all of a sudden we have to make choices about what to do with our pension money that may well affect whether we can live a reasonably comfortable old age and retirement, or whether old age is a daily struggle. These are new choices for Americans. The phone, the health care, the retirement plan, these did not exist as choices 25 or 30 years ago, or rarely did, and now they exist as choices for almost everyone. And finally, next slide, more relevant to the topic of your meeting, institutions of higher education, including my own, have completely abdicated responsibility for guiding students by essentially giving them this gigantic cafeteria menu of things to take and then letting them choose. It's true that students get advice from advisors. As you probably know, it is certainly true at my institution. The thing that faculty members do worst is advise students. So if they rely on advisors, they're likely to get bad advice. But there's almost nothing in the curriculum that pushes people in one direction rather than another. It's spend 4 years here, meet some minimal requirements, and then you get a diploma. So we have certainly dramatically increased choice in every area of life in modern American society. Next slide. The world used to look like this, and now it looks like this. Next slide. And next slide. The question is this good news or bad news? And the answer, next slide, is yes. Now, I'm not going to talk about what's good about having all this choice. Choice is good. There's a lot of research in psychology, 50 years of research in psychology, showing how important it is for human beings to be able to have control over their lives, to be able to be autonomous. So choice is good, unquestionably. The mistake that psychologists have made, and arguably the mistake that policymakers have made, is to assume that because choice is good, it is only